So where do we go next? We have this inquiry-based problem, and the students have been engaged. They've done a lot of very interesting soft skills, from guessing to abstracting and decomposing and problem solving, all this great stuff we want from them. What have they walked away from with that experience, and where do we go next? You know, they've finished a water tank problem, let's say, about volume of a prism. They found the volume of one prism, maybe two with an extension problem. I don't want to assume that student has a strong understanding of volume of prisms, and I definitely don't assume that they are fluent. They can do these quickly and nimbly. So the next day, we're going to spend some time formalizing the mathematics and then practicing it. And then we're going to practice on a whole bunch of just naked number type problems, different kinds of interesting prisms, tilted on their sides, straight up, those sort of things, and see what students do with those. But I think that, you know, as inquiry enthusiasts, we can downplay, our liability is that of downplaying the importance of fluency. And fluency and practice and skill practice is so great once the students have a really strong conception about when will this be useful, where would I use this. That's what the inquiry gives us.
There's one example in the afternoon class, like two groups where they managed to get something, but were not as confident from the very beginning in approaching this problem. So those are the sorts of things you make note of. That potentially this type of thinking, for at least some of them, see, this is where when we get down to doing some individual stuff, it'll become even more evident. But just taking note of that at a starting point, that some may be maybe a little weaker reasoning proportionally.
And so you just mentioned when you get down to doing things individually. Can you give some examples of what that might be?
It could look like a bunch of different things. We might go to activities from things like TIPS, and we might just do some of those activities. We might need to turn to the textbook and selectively target a few questions. We might have to pull it back to something mechanical, you know, setting up and solving proportions, like pulling it all the way back to that. I say pulling it all the way back to that, but that once we know these concepts, then we need to look at the skills foundation. So some of these kids I mentioned, some of them might be weaker in the skills foundation. That might be holding them back. Some of them might be weaker in the reasoning, specifically this type of reasoning. But we have a whole curriculum and achievement chart that can help us to know what everyone needs. As we left the grade 7s just now, I left them, after the consolidation, I left them with some practice from the tips on rates, which probably after doing the problem we did, realistically would probably be quite easy, but there was just 2 pages, probably 8 to 10 different rates, different calculations, different wrinkles, so the practice aspect is there. But as I was saying, they need me less for that part, unless they need specific interventions, you know, with their understanding, to correct understanding, or if there's major misunderstandings. There's an extra layer added. Are they using technology effectively to capture mathematical thinking?
It's not. It's big.
So these are the 3.
Yeah.
Come on. Go right up. I'm not like totally checking the math.
There you go.
I guess it's new and novel as compared to the chart paper. But new and novel can be its challenge, so students themselves need, you know, more practice and time with their devices to think about how to show their thinking. So a drawback is it can take a lot more time, but I think building the technology into the culture of the classroom definitely helps.
If you're thoughtful, you think about what are the things that are really important to practice. So I think there are skills, computational skills that are important to practice. But I also think it's important to practice problem solving. And I also think it's important to practice thinking. One of the ideas I often work with teachers is that I believe one of the ways they should work with kids is to say something like, so if I tell you this, what else do you know? I think you should practice that too.